It was swift and brutal from the Melbourne Football Club board last night, informing Goodwin he's gone after 9 years at the helm. The wider footy club and the playing group were informed this morning, and right now, just over the train tracks here from Amy Park in Melbourne, the wider footy club is meeting to be addressed by Simon Goodwin at 1 o'clock. Goodwin and the president, Brad Green, the current president, Brad Green, will address media, so we'll bring that to you shortly right here on the screens of 7. But Simon Goodwin, it brings a sharp end to his football career with football coaching career at the Melbourne Footy Club with 3 games left in this season. Just last Monday, he presented to the board to try and pitch his way into the future. That's despite having a contract for 2026. He will now have that contract paid out in full, close to $1 million. Just a couple of days after that board meeting, he said he felt he had the full support of the board. That is clearly not the case. The club coming to the decision tonight to part ways with their 2021 Premiership coach. He broke a 57-year drought, as you mentioned. He's one of only 4 Premiership coaches in the history of the Melbourne Football Club. He will be remembered as a champion of the club, but unfortunately in recent times the results just have not gone their way. So confirmation today, Simon Goodwin gone as Melbourne coach. He will front the media at 1 o'clock today alongside the president, Brad Green.
Simon Goodwin sacked, as you said, effective immediately. Even more remarkable given he coached Melbourne to an 83-point win against West Coast on the weekend at Marvel Stadium. Very few coaches get sacked mid-season, even fewer get sacked after a win. But this has clearly been the writing on the wall for quite some time. I thought Simon Goodwin was in trouble at the end of the season. The fact it's come before round 22 is, I guess, some surprise. The reality of Simon Goodwin's tenure is this. He's a premiership coach. He's the first Melbourne premiership coach since 1964, and for that he deserves extraordinary credit. But they haven't won a final since 2021. Straight sets in 22, straight sets in 23, and no finals last year, and of course, absolutely no finals this year. So I think overall, in the fullness of time, we'll look at Simon Goodwin's tenure and say, yes, he did an amazing job, but they've declined since they won a flag, and for that, the Melbourne board lost patience.
Melbourne has sacked its only living premiership coach, Simon Goodwin, given his marching orders after a late-night board meeting.
Although Goodwin walks away with a $1 million handshake, he still believed he was the man to drag the Demons out of the doldrums. Chief football reporter Tom Morris has today's developments.
This didn't have the feel of a typical coach sacking.
I don't think any coach has been sacked after having an 83-point win.
While there was the occasional moment of levity,
Probably what I won't miss is probably driving down to Casey.
Melbourne's situation on the field is no joke, and the board, led for the time being by Brad Green, had quite clearly had enough. What would you say to people who say the club hasn't respected Simon in this time?
All I say to them is that we as a board came to a decision that it's time for our club for a new voice and a new leader to take this group forward.
After 9 seasons in charge, headlined by that drought-breaking premiership. Goodwin was told last night it was all over. Were you blindsided, Simon?
Oh, look, I was disappointed. There's no doubt about that, but I certainly respect the board's decision.
The news first breaking on morning radio.
Simon Goodwin's been sacked. He was told last night.
And there was none more taken aback than former Demon Gary Lyon.
I'm stunned, shocked, totally shocked. Had no heads up on this whatsoever.
But this was a business decision. After missing the finals last season, it's been another disaster of a year on the field. The Demons languishing in the bottom part of the ladder with 7 wins.
We should be playing finals, we believe, as a board, but we don't shy away from that.
And this isn't the only change coming for the crisis-plagued club. In the next few weeks, they'll have a new CEO, a new president, perhaps a new footy boss, and big decisions to be made on key players, all following a season from hell for the Demons. It's a big assignment for whoever the Demons turn to. John Longmire heads a list of experienced names who could be considered. Fellow Premiership coach Adam Simpson is also an option, while Nathan Buckley might be tempted by the challenge. Former Cat star Corey Enright is untried, but a highly fancied assistant at St Kilda. Brendan Lade has runs on the board as a senior assistant at the Dogs, and then there's Hayden Skipworth and Brent Montgomery. Has the club, or anyone associated with the club, a third party with the direction of the club, spoken to any potential candidate?
What do you mean by a third party?
Well, someone that you tell to go and speak to a candidate.
No.
No. So you haven't canvassed anyone else?
No.
As for Goodwin, although gutted, his ambition remains.
I'd love to coach again. I love coaching. I love the game. Right now, I need a little holiday.
But until then, it's time to play spectator alongside his 3 kids.
Eddie was 5 when I first came to this footy club. He's 17, heading into year 12, and he's a Demon. He doesn't know who else he'd support, but he did mention that, geez, Dad, your old club Adelaide's sitting on top of the ladder. I might.
And Tom joins me now live. Tom, how have the players taken this news?
Alicia, the players loved Simon Goodwin. In fact, every single one of them was at the media conference today where Simon Goodwin and Brad Green spoke to the cameras. It was in the MCG. It was a packed room. And then they played soccer in Richmond. Our cameras with Trent Neese caught them having a kick of the round ball. They were meant to train at midday today. Clearly, today's events meant that couldn't happen, so they just had a kick of the soccer ball this afternoon at an oval in Richmond. The players love Goodwin so much. I can't imagine another coach being sacked with much more support from players, from Max Gawn all the way down to first and second year players.
Simon Goodwin's 9 years at Melbourne have come to an end. Just ahead of the dissection and the analysis, Gaz, just take a moment to pause. He's an immense figure at two footy clubs. He's a Hall of Famer at Adelaide, and he's one of 4 premiership coaches at the oldest footy club at all. So perhaps maybe you're best to speak about his legacy and maybe indulge us with your connection to him.
Yeah, I mean, just seeing this stuff in the background here, I will have a connection with him forever. That's one of the greatest days of my life from a football perspective, and this is a club that I've loved for a long, long time, and wondered at various stages whether we'd ever get ourselves out of the mire and back to a position where we could bring a premiership. And so Bert Chadwick, Frank Checker-Hughes, Norm Smith and Simon Goodwin are the 4 men that have delivered a premiership to the oldest football club in this game. And that puts him in rare air. He's a hero of this football club and will be forever and a day. And if Melbourne supporters haven't taken a moment today to thank him for what he and the players were able to do on this day, then they should. And I know it hasn't ended in the manner that they would like it, and we can talk about the reasons why. But that's one of the greatest days ever. 57 years in the making, that was. And I tell you what, I've been here since 1984, and there was times where, I didn't know whether our club was either going to exist, let alone win a premiership again. So Simon Goodwin delivered that, and he'll be a hero forever. And it hasn't finished in the manner that he would have liked today, and we'll unpack that now.
And they built a great premiership, didn't they? As one in adverse circumstances away from home.
Amazing, yeah.
And they did win it with a team that was great in its moment.
Yeah, it was, and those boys will be heroes forever. And I was driving around today with the radio switched on like everyone was, sort of listening, and this nonsense about whether it was a real premiership. I mean, if any Melbourne supporter saying that, you're not a true Melbourne fan. This was, I know we'd all loved it to have been at the MCG, but have a look at that. Have a look at these scenes here. That'll live on forever. And of course, we all would have loved it to be more than one, but it wasn't. But geez, I'm thankful there was one.
Last night's decision. So it's a board that, through Brad Green and its presidents, has expressed its desire for change. They want a new voice. They want a new leader. They clearly lost faith that Simon could and would be able to turn this around, either in the short or the medium term. And rather than it be about him being the last premiership coach, they couldn't see him as the next premiership coach. Yeah. Did they make the case convincingly for change?
Not today, but press conferences are difficult. I mean, there's got... You know, Brad just kept getting asked, and he kept saying, "Oh, we need a new voice." Now, there's obviously got to be greater nuance and level of detail about why the board, the Melbourne Footy Club board, have reached the decision that Simon Goodwin is not to go on. They've just sacked the premiership coach, and they want to have reasons more than just a new voice, which I suspect there is in their own mind. So, like Simon, you respect the decision. It's a tough decision. It wouldn't be easy for Brad Green, who's a former captain of this football club as well, to sack a premiership coach.
Is it a justifiable decision?
Yeah, I think they can justify it in their own mind. I didn't necessarily agree with it, but I'm not railing, and slamming the desk and saying this is... He's been there 9 years. He's had a good run at it. He's delivered the ultimate. I would hope and hope that he coached the year out, and they may have arrived at the Luke Beveridge situation where we say, look, let's find out, let's push hard for this next year and don't extend you, but let's coach for your life. But it's not to be. And Simon was class. I thought he was a classy performer today. It was almost as good as he's performed. He's never been a natural media performer, which has been, I think, a bit of the problem for Melbourne fans. He hasn't got natural charisma, if you like. He is in private, and there was a hint of that today.
Yep.
Humour and a bit of self-deprecation. And there is absolutely no question those players love him, and there's absolutely no question in my mind that he has been coaching not to save his job. He's been coaching to set the club up again, to have another tilt at it. But there's been some wrinkles along the way, and too many, it would appear, for the board, and that's the prerogative. This is where you hope that you've got a great board, Jared. This is when football club, and you, as a supporter, I don't know whether you get involved with the election of boards. These days it's a bit different, but geez, you hope you've got a good board who make good decisions.
So there's the 2 years of straight set exits, and then there's 2 years of decline. We'll get to the complexities around this year in a tick, but how much do you think the sameness around the way Melbourne would lose strategically, which you've identified, and it's driven people mad.
Yeah.
How much of that, the lack of connection to the forward part of the ground, plays a role, do you think?
I think that has been a contributing factor. I don't know whether it's... Because I think that's started to evolve in recent times, and I could throw out all sorts of numbers to you to say that they have been connecting a bit better recently. But it was the sameness for a long time, and that was a frustration for him. He sat here, we asked him about it. But it's sort of greater than that. I think it's a football club that's confused at the moment exactly where they are. And it's a football club that's disconnected. I don't think there's any doubt about that, and has been for a long time. So then you go to support mechanisms for your coaching structure, and it was pertinent that he mentioned it 4 or 5 times today. You must have a strong, stable off-field support mechanism, and I doubt whether he's felt that over the last couple of years.
Yes, and this is where this year's scenario plays a role. This is a football club that's lived in a void this year. It would have been a miracle if the coach had been successful in these circumstances, identifying the need for change last year, but not being able to execute change. The next president is not in the job, and the chief executive was appointed in April and doesn't start till September. There's no elite program in the world that has those pillars absent and achieves success. So stability, he hasn't had stability since Peter Jackson left, and there's no point denying that. No. But alignment. So the alignment was clearly lost. Is from the very first team he picked this year, which had 5 debutants in it, you went, oh, hello. He's not coaching for the here and the now, and he's not coaching for his job. He's coaching for the shortest possible turnaround, knowing that he's got 2 years to achieve that. That you don't get that disconnect if you're in constant contact with the president and the chief executive who aren't in their positions. I think it undermined his capacity to do the job that he knew needed to be done. And when you know is when Brad Green says, well, this board expects to be playing finals. Yeah. Simon Goodwin didn't expect to be playing finals this year.
I think that's a really good point. And as a coach, when you're in this state of transition and, in his own mind, he may be looking at this club and saying, I need to make serious change here. Who am I selling that to? Am I selling that to Brad? Am I selling it to the interim? Do I have to sell it to Guerra when he comes in? Do I have to sell it to Stephen Smith? And now I've got to sell it to the playing group. And it might have been to the stage where I think he had arrived at the point where he understood that there needed to be substantial change. And then you go to the playing group and say, what is your motivation here? And I think that's another part of what we discussed today. This is a footy club who went to the top, as we've seen, and then I think have struggled with their reason for being as an individual in amongst a team setting. What is the motivation for the leaders of that football club? From the top down, no one questions Max. All the way down, what underpins this footy club? Are we team first, or are we individual that hopefully spills into the team? And I think that's fundamental to where this disconnect comes. I think the board sits at it and looks, we should be better. Yeah. We have him, and him in amongst these. And I think from a coaching point of view, they go, OK, well, they are individually outstanding, but collectively they're not getting it done, so there needs to be change. Slowly moving some magnets, slowly doing a thing. I'm not sure whether they've embraced it. When they won the Premiership, they were the most selfless team in the competition, and it was trotted out everywhere. I don't think they are now, and I'm not sure whether the board over the journey has been particularly selfless as well.
Yeah. So if the coach had come to the conclusion that it was time to break up the senior core, where would he have taken that idea?
Who do you sell that to?
He didn't know whether he had the support of the board. I suspect he knew that last Monday after that board meeting. He's got a footy director who is closely aligned to, and it's hard to imagine that change doesn't come as well. He doesn't have a chief executive, and the president's not going to be there. So I think to run a circumstance like that is to invite failure, and then to cast judgment on the man who didn't know he was coaching for his life right now. You can only get that when there's a void, and Melbourne have lived in a void.
They're screaming out for a figurehead, Jared. A strong, decisive leader of this football club, apart from the coach. They're screaming out for it. Is it going to be Stephen Smith, Paul Guerra? I don't know, but over the journey, that has not been there.
The biggest question that sits over them now is, has the dynasty been squandered for what might have been? So 2021 is magnificently won. They start 2022 10-0. And this, every branch of the footy club has to own this, from the board, who were involved in pitted battles with the former president for far too long, to the administration, who didn't face up to the flaws in the culture, they didn't address the locker room, and then they denied what was happening publicly. For the players on all sorts of different fronts, from the Entrecôte bust up to the players who weren't diligent around their professional careers and the implications of that, the unfortunate injury suffered by Christian Petrarca and the club's terrible failing in dealing with him as a human being, let alone a player, and then the coaching setup, which wasn't able to rectify the one flaw in their game. So they finished top 4 the next 2 years and go out in straight sets before the decline sets in.
Yeah, the next year after the grand final, the fundamental job is to put yourself in a position to win the premiership, and they did that in the following 2 years. They won 16. They had 16 win seasons back to back and got themselves where they needed to be. Failed badly, I would say, in 2022. Lost those 2 finals to Sydney and Brisbane, and then put that aside and had another good 2023. Lost to Collingwood by 7 points, and then the 2-point loss to Carlton. Really disappointing, but. The straight sets sort of infers that they just fumbled it away. They didn't. They put themselves right there again and fell short. And that can be a failing if you consider that the talent on the list was better than that. But that's what happens, and it's hard to back up, as we've seen in recent times. The last 2 years have been enormously disappointing, and all the things you talked about off-field and the unsettled nature of it all are reasons. But Simon would also have to own, and the coaching group, own the other aspects of that, because the discipline and maybe your loyalty to the group that took you to the premiership is so strong that perhaps in another world you would have come down harder on them. But I think there would be a lot of people that would suggest they did make the most of the list. There's no problem. There's no issue about that.
And so how much of that sits with the club? So every level of it, as judgment is cast today, all those pillars are eventually going to change for the new start. Is how much does the club own that they didn't get all that they might have out of the era that they built?
Well, if they don't, then they'll wallow in the mediocrity for another 5 or 6 years, Jared. So the best teams are the honest teams. And the honesty starts at the top. Did we get that right? From the board, honesty sessions there, down to the coaching group and then to the playing group. And look at yourselves and just say, how much time have we invested in the last 2 to 3 years, or since we won that premiership, in getting back to what made us great? Or how much did we then go and splinter and worry about ourselves individually?
So what to do next? And this is specific to the team. Contention or rebuild? So to listen to Brad Green today, they hold a view, whether they should or they shouldn't, whether they're equipped to form that view or not, is they believe that they should be playing finals. And there's not many who agree with them on that front.
Yeah, so Brad says to list capable of playing finals. Goodwin all year has said this is a team in transition and that it may take time. And in his mind, he thought he had next year. And so if you're going to go to the market, the footy, I think most of the footy world agrees that the game has evolved and Melbourne has been relatively stagnant. So you're preparing for a life that doesn't necessarily revolve around Oliver, Petrarca and Viney, and it might be Lingford, Langford and Windsor. And then the club have got to buy into that. So then you go, okay, well, that's going to take a bit more time. That's not, that transition means that finals are at absolute best, not absolutely, a given. So then you go to the coaching group, and if you're selling the wrong message to a coach, the smart coach is saying, well, why would I go to that group where the expectation is so out of alignment where the list is at? And so all those decisions have got to be made. I think they're in transition and flux, and they are changing, and they do want to change what's been driving them for a long time. And that means you probably go back a bit and you're going to hang around. But if you draft well and you continue to invest in Windsor, Langford and Lindsay, then they're hoping they get that right.
If Max has got 2 years left, could they contend again while he's there, in your mind?
Everything would have to go absolutely right. You're banking on Oliver getting back to his very best and Petrarca getting back to his best. But you're also you're banking May and Lever and all that leadership group to just have some humility about where they've been, accept what is there, and then get back to work.
The end of the coaching regime of Simon Goodwin at the Melbourne Football Club, the only living premiership coach of the Melbourne Football Club, unbelievably. And today his tenure finished. As we say in football, boys, You pick when you come in, but you don't often get to pick when you go out. The man who broke the story this morning is Tom Morris. And Tom, welcome to you. Take us through the day itself, because it was quite incredible what happened.
Yeah, so the senior leaders at Melbourne were notified this morning there'd be an emergency Zoom meeting, which Alan Richardson would chair. In that meeting, which lasted sort of 15 to 20 minutes, they were told that Simon Goodwin's tenure was up at Melbourne, that he wouldn't be coaching this weekend and being replaced by Troy Chaplin. From then, there was a media conference called, Eddie, for 1 p.m. at the MCG, where Brad Green would sit alongside Simon Goodwin. Now, Brad Green, remember, the night before had driven to Simon Goodwin's house and notified him that he was essentially sacked, that the board had unanimously reached that decision. Every single player was in the room. Interestingly, Paul Guerra, the incoming CEO, was next to Alan Richardson for much of the media conference, and Max Gawn, of course, Jake Lever were there as well. Eddie, Hurdy and Sloaney, I've never seen a coach be sacked with such widespread player support, but the feeling is today, and it has been for a while, that this club just needs a fresh start, and that's exactly what Brad Green said.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's disappointing for Simon, and congratulations first to Simon on an outstanding coaching career. Having coached with him at Essendon for 3 or 4 years, outstanding coach, man management, exceptional. Technical ability was...
Outstanding today as well.
Yeah, technical ability was great, and his work ethic was second to none. And I'm disappointed for him. I think he got a rough ride there to get the sack. But to watch the players and the way they rallied around him shows that he still had the players. But it seemed to me that there's some people aligned with him, or he thought were with him, particularly around the football club, and that turned up at his house, that maybe he was a bit blindsided.
Let's get to what he had to say at the press conference today.
But I'm disappointed because I think we're a hell of a lot closer to turning our club and team back into a contender again than what people think. And I'm disappointed that I'm not able to work with this great bunch of players that I know that we've developed and spent a lot of time developing over time. And I'm disappointed I'm not going to be a part of that. I'm going to miss the people, first and foremost. And probably what I won't miss is probably driving down to Casey.
Which highlights exactly a major problem. I know it was a good gag at the end there, but until Melbourne find a permanent home, they are just a bunch of gypsies, and they have... It's incredible. So Paul Guerra's first job is to not only hire a new coach, but to get this deal done somewhere.
We talk about Simon's tenure as coach, particularly the last couple of years, interim president, no CEO, and particularly just no home. It fascinates me. I can't believe they still haven't found a home. And for the coach to win a premiership through the COVID years...
He conceded that was an obstacle.
Yeah, but to do what he's done is a remarkable effort.
Let's, we're just to our producers, whack up the timeline now, just off the back of what Hurdy was saying. We've got a timeline we want to roll here, just to take you through what he had to go through at various stages, and we'll find that in a second.
Pretty tumultuous.
There it is. Have a look at this. So this is back in 21. You had the president at war with the former president. You're going through there. You've got Clayton Oliver going to hospital. You had all the drugs issues that was around the club. You had Angus Brayshaw, one of their leaders, gone. They lost Alex Neil-Bullen. You had Petrarca's injury last year. You had Jack Viney getting a 4-year deal. You had the Premiership president, Kate Roffey, gone. You had Gary Pert, gone in tumultuous circumstances. You had Joel Smith, rubbed out for 4 years on a drug case. Recently, Jake Lever. I don't think that was much of a big deal. But, of course, the one that knocked him off was, let there be no mistaking, I think his cards were marked when they lost the first 5 this year, when they lost to Essendon, when they lost to North Melbourne, and then they lost the unlosable game against St Kilda. And we just might roll the vision just at the end of that game. And I think this is the bit that... I know what it's like when you're sitting there with fellow directors and your phone explodes, when every Melbourne supporter's watching this going, what in God's name is happening? How does St Kilda work out how to win this game? How could we lose it from here? But not only were we, 54 points up, but we completely botched everything up. Our senior players were running around literally like headless chooks, and then this happened. That is the straw that broke the camel's back, because Tom, they can say whatever they like. They didn't sack him this morning. They didn't sack him last night. His cards were marked last week, and they had to get things done. And I reckon Stephen Smith, the incoming president, wanted it off the books before he arrived back to take over the job.
Yeah, and probably Paul Guerra as well, Sony. So this 83-point win on the weekend against West Coast meant nothing. And they essentially said that. The reality with Simon Goodwin is, and you're not the only one to say this, Eddie, many people said it last week, Mick Gleeson wrote in The Age, he was a dead man walking at the end of the season. The fact it came today was a bit of a surprise, but the last 2 or 3 weeks have really meant that he's
But why was he blindsided as much as he was? I mean, he looked generally blindsided.
Well, what do you do? Do you give him a warning it's coming?
No, I think you get a feel. I do think he was genuinely surprised. I think it was,
Yeah. He was disappointed, he said.
Slaney, that game there, is that the player's fault or his fault?
No, and so that last quarter, probably the first half, you can change some things as coaches, but that last 5 minutes, you can't change anything, coach. You're looking at that going, this is up to my captain, this is up to my leaders to get this sorted, and when you're not in control, it makes it pretty tough.
And you know Simon very well, obviously. You found him a fantastic player.
Yeah, and this is why it's probably a surprise to players too, because Goody, he went to work on absolutely everything that players always gave him feedback
so this
for.
is them this afternoon. They were meant to have training at midday. They went to Kevin Bartlett Reserve in Richmond and they played soccer. Trent Neese from Channel 9 and the cameras caught them down there just having a kick at the soccer ball. I guess to raise morale and because they couldn't train properly at midday. They will train tomorrow to Ed Langdon's 200 this weekend, so they'll celebrate that. They needed a circuit breaker, this club. In the end, it often comes down to the coach to create that circuit breaker.
So many cruel jokes you could do there. We're not going to do
it. That's the old Richmond Soccer Club, that ground there.
It is right next to Kevin Bartlett Reserve.
Yes, how did they get a great place down there, Kevin Bartlett Reserve?
As they used to say, the great Sergio Paradise once said that, they only mow one side of Kevin Bartlett Reserve and then rake the grass over there.
I can't laugh at that, Ed.
No, you can't, Tom. Back to Turkey for you.
You've got your own...
what's next, Ed? What have you got?
Let's have a look at Simon Goodwin's CV as a person, because Simon was our guest here only a few weeks ago, and we all think he's a ripper. He's probably going to move to Sydney, where his partner is these days, working and
in a big fund up there, Christine, his partner up there, doing a great job there.
I would suggest that unless the AFL are mad, they need to get him involved if he's not already picked up by Sydney Swans or by GWS.